Humanism doesn't have any sacred texts like the equivalent of a Bible or a Quran. So as a humanist, I am free to use any text, old or new, which might help me to understand the world and work out how I can lead a good life. But I believe this freedom goes hand in hand with taking responsibility for what we believe in and do, and that our decisions, and making sure that our decisions don't harm anybody else.
Humanists don't have the problems that religions have. I mean, they've got their sacred books like the Quran and the Bible, which were written centuries ago, and they have the problem of trying to interpret things in quite different conditions into the modern day. We do have our important books. There's Newton's Principia Mathematica, which showed how mathematics could trace the movement of the planets. There's Darwin's Origin of the Species, which showed how evolution could take place. But these aren't treated as dogma or incontestable truths. Indeed, Einstein came along later and disproved some of Newton's work, and the discovery of DNA has changed Darwin's theories. The way humanists resolve moral issues is to use reason and empathetic attitudes. And this has been taken up by society as a whole, really, since the Second World War. This doesn't make moral issues any easier to resolve. Just as for the religious, these are difficult questions. And moral attitudes can change over time. But humanists have the advantage is they don't have to interpret ancient dogma before coming to the right moral conclusions.
Humanists rely on the totality of human knowledge accumulated up to the present day. We've been continually learning, observing and inventing throughout our history. The humanist view is that sacred texts are important historical documents that record our knowledge of reality at the time they were written, but that we now know so much more today due to the huge increase in cumulative human knowledge that we can access on our mobiles and in libraries like the one I'm sitting in today. Anthropologists and archaeologists have worked out the early origins of humans as a natural species by studying evidence such as our bones left buried in the ground. We now know that we emerged about 2 million years ago in Africa. We developed language and the ability to communicate around 100,000 years ago. We started farming and domesticating animals only about 10,000 years ago, when the first towns and cities started to appear. This is the period when we invented writing and early forms of the money system. Most of today's major religions also appeared at this time, based on ancient religious texts which were first written down 2,000 to 3,000 years ago. These early books recorded the earlier oral traditions and ancient legends. They are important historical documents that contain the collective wisdom of humanity at that time. However, a step change in human history occurred after the invention of the printing press in the 15th century, which democratized access to knowledge and know-how, which previously was limited to the religions and the ruling aristocracy. The printing press led to the Reformation, democracy, modern economics, the Industrial Revolution, and scientific progress, which has led eventually to the modern living standards we enjoy today. The emergence of the internet recently has further democratized access to knowledge, and we all have the totality of human knowledge at our fingertips on our mobile phones. And today's young generation are the first generation that have access to the world's libraries on their mobile phones. And this will lead inevitably to another explosion in human progress, and I just hope I'm around to see it.
I think interpretation of sacred texts is not a direct problem for us humanists. We have no texts regarded as sacred. But there are plenty of books that most humanists respect, and all remain open to question and open to revision if new evidence comes to light. Humanists respect authors whose ideas help us understand the world or tell us how to behave. Darwin's Descent of Man, Einstein's papers on relativity, discoveries in cosmology, quantum theory, biology, genetics, they all help us understand the world. So do Jane Austen's novels. Humanists respect many teachers and moral philosophers. including religious teachers such as Jesus, Muhammad, the Buddha, Confucius, all of whom taught the Golden Rule. Closer to modern humanism are atheist thinkers, including early Indian, Greek and Roman philosophers. Enlightenment authors such as Mary Wollstonecraft and David Hume came later. I worry about the accuracy of any sacred text, let alone the interpretation. The books in the Christian Bible were written over a period of 500 years. None was written in English. Then for another 1,000 years, the main way of creating a copy was for monks to write out Latin text by hand, pen and ink, often by candlelight. Many monks chose to enhance the text with beautiful illumination and annotation. That Latin itself was a translation from Hebrew, Greek and Aramaic. Well, I'm married to a linguist, and my wife tells me that copying and translation always introduces errors. So many are unintentional, a mistranslation or missing out a bit. But others are intentional, and they reflect the motives or the circumstances of the translator. I was taught to say, "Forgive our trespasses." This word was chosen by William Tyndale, the man who first translated the Bible into English. The King James Bible and many others translate it as debts. In my newest Bible, Matthew says debts and Luke says sins. Early Greek Gospels use a word that really does mean monetary debts, and debts was long favoured by Protestant sects of Christianity. And the words chosen by any translator can depend on who is authorising the translation. The King James Bible translators had to get approval from the royal court, and they often suggested alternative words. Few people dared incur the king's displeasure. So to me, all this illustrates the dangers of treating any text as sacred. But it's other people's interpretations of their sacred texts that are the issue. If fundamental religious views become the law of the land, it can have a massive effect on everybody, including humanists like me. In England, Christians legally burned other Christians who interpreted the Bible differently. For years, gay relationships were illegal in the UK, and still are in many countries. In England, I can't be legally married by a humanist wedding celebrant, though I can in Scotland. It's legal in the UK for anyone, even a doctor, to help someone end their own life. So many people who are ill and would love to die painlessly must suffer months of daily agony. These injustices occur because a few people in power interpret the sacred text as prohibiting humane or kind acts. They impose religious beliefs, even ideas that are dating from the Stone Age, on people who do not share their beliefs. It can be much worse. In many countries, anyone denying the state religion is liable to persecution or even the death penalty. Governments and courts rarely enforce this, but mobs of religious people have killed humanists and atheists on this pretext, even just last month. And as I'm saying this, the president of the Nigerian Humanist Association, Mubarak Bala, is in prison, starting a 24-year jail sentence for posting content on Facebook that said he did not believe in God. All these happen because of some people's interpretation of their sacred texts.